Imagine standing in the center of a crowded room. Everyone around you is laughing, talking, blending into a blur of motion. But for you, the volume of the world is suddenly muted. All you can hear is the slow, heavy ticking of a clock. What would it feel like if your mind was a high-speed engine, built for the vast highways of the universe, but you were forced to drive it on the narrow, congested roads of everyday small talk? We often treat extreme intelligence as a superpower, a golden ticket to a perfect life. But what if, for some, it is an invisible cage? Today, we are exploring the quiet isolation of the highly gifted. This is not a story about arrogance. It is about the profound loneliness of seeing everything so clearly, yet feeling completely unseen. Society loves the myth of the genius. We are told from a young age that a high IQ is the ultimate advantage. It is supposed to be the master key that unlocks doors to effortless success, unbreakable confidence, and a perfectly constructed life. We picture the brilliant mind as a triumphant hero, conquering complex problems while the world applauds. But that is only the surface. What the tests do not measure, and what society rarely talks about, is the heavy price of that relentless clarity. Having a profoundly high IQ is less like holding a golden ticket and more like looking through a magnifying glass that you can never, ever put down. It strips away a very specific, very human privilege, the privilege of simply not knowing. Ignorance, as they say, is bliss. It allows us to overlook the tiny flaws in our relationships, the contradictions in our culture, and the fragile illusions that keep everyday life moving smoothly. For the hyper-intelligent mind, those illusions are entirely transparent. The world becomes intensely, sometimes cruelly, vivid. You see the hidden motives behind a casual joke. You notice the systemic failures no one else wants to admit. You process the weight of a conversation before the other person has even finished their sentence. You see it all, and because you see it all, the gap between you and everyone else widens, leaving you entirely awake in a world that seems to be sleepwalking. To understand this isolation, we have to look at how our world is actually built. Everything around us, from the structure of our classrooms to the unwritten rules of social etiquette, is engineered for the center of the bell curve. The systems are tailored for the majority, and logically, that makes perfect sense. But if your cognitive abilities sit at the absolute outer edges of that statistical curve, you are essentially born into a world that was never programmed for you. This profound disconnect almost always starts in childhood. We tend to picture gifted children as happy prodigies, effortlessly raising their hands in class. But the internal reality is often much quieter and significantly more isolating. Very early on, these individuals realize they are fundamentally out of sync. They ask existential questions that make adults deeply uncomfortable. They obsess over the vastness of the universe or the concept of infinity, while their peers are playing in the sandbox. Instead of being truly understood, they are quickly given labels to make them easier to digest. They are called old souls, or worse, they are labeled as weird, awkward, or simply too intense. They learn, often through silent rejection, that their natural way of thinking is a disruption to the norm. As they grow into adults, this friction becomes most painful in our daily communication. Everyday human connection relies heavily on small talk. We bond over the weather, weekend routines, and casual gossip. But for a mind that is constantly recognizing complex patterns and starving for deep macro-level concepts, small talk is not merely boring. It is actively exhausting. It feels like trying to breathe through a microscopic straw. They desperately want to dive into the heavy currents of philosophy, human nature, or the hidden structures of society. But instead, they find themselves forced to tread water in the shallow end. They stand there, smiling and nodding in polite agreement, while their mind is screaming to explore the depths. To truly understand this profound exhaustion, we must look at the physical reality of a gifted brain. We have been taught to imagine high intellect as a cold, calculating machine, completely detached from emotion. But the truth is entirely the opposite. The Polish psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski identified a psychological framework he called overexcitabilities. This theory explains that the nervous system of a highly intelligent person is literally wired to react more intensely to stimuli. It is essentially an operating system missing its standard filters. They do not just think faster, they experience the entire spectrum of human existence with an overwhelming, sometimes crushing intensity. A loud room, a complex piece of music, or the unspoken sorrow of a stranger sitting across the table can flood their senses with a heavy physical weight. It is exactly like being a highly sensitive antenna, completely unable to turn off the incoming signals. Every emotion, every sound, and every shift in the atmosphere is absorbed deeply. This constant, involuntary processing of sensory and emotional data leaves them perpetually drained, long before the day is even over. Because their mind connects these abstract dots at such a rapid pace, they inevitably reach the boundaries of everyday concerns much faster than the rest of us. This rapid acceleration pushes them to the edge of a very dark and quiet cliff. Psychologists refer to this as existential depression. While society encourages us to focus on immediate goals like career milestones, acquiring wealth, or planning the next vacation, the hyper-intelligent mind often bypasses these entirely. Instead, they find themselves paralyzed by the sheer absurdity and the terrifying scale of the universe. They confront the finite nature of human life and the frightening lack of inherent meaning in our daily routines. And they often grapple with these massive, terrifying concepts at an incredibly young age, long before they have the emotional maturity to process them safely. Imagine standing in the middle of a vibrant, crowded room surrounded by laughter, and suddenly feeling the crushing weight of your own mortality. How do you go back to discussing casual weekend plans when your mind is actively wrestling with the silent void of existence? The simple answer is, you cannot. This relentless ability to see the deep patterns of the world creates perhaps the most tragic psychological burden of all. It is known as the Cassandra Syndrome. According to ancient mythology, Cassandra was given the power to see the future, but cursed so that no one would ever believe her warnings. For the extremely gifted, this ancient curse is a daily reality. Because they subconsciously calculate variables and outcomes so quickly, they can clearly see the disastrous end of a deeply flawed relationship. They can spot the fatal crack in a corporate strategy or predict a collective failure long before the first signs appear. They see the train rushing toward the broken tracks. Naturally, out of deep care, they try to warn the people they love. They try to sound the alarm. But when they speak up, they are almost always met with blank stares or active resistance. They are quickly dismissed as overthinkers. People tell them they are being too negative, too anxious, or too controlling. And so, they are forced to stand by, entirely helpless, watching the exact tragedy they predicted unfold precisely as they said it would. The repeated heartbreak of speaking the truth and being rejected eventually shatters their spirit. The pure exhaustion of trying to save a world that refuses to listen pushes them to a breaking point. They realize their clarity is not a gift to be shared, but a heavy secret to be kept. This realization forces them into a quiet, desperate choice for their own mental survival. This brings us to a deeply tragic paradox. As cognitive ability increases, the statistical probability of finding genuine, effortless connection drastically decreases. You would think that a brilliant mind could easily navigate social dynamics, but instead, they find themselves stranded on an isolated intellectual island. Following the constant exhaustion of the Cassandra Syndrome, a highly gifted person quickly learns a new survival tactic. They learn the exhausting art of dumbing down. Because they know that sharing their true, complex perspective only leads to conflict or alienation, they actively choose to shrink themselves. They put on a social mask just to survive the day. They force polite laughter at jokes they saw coming a mile away. They nod along to superficial observations, carefully swallowing their deeper insights so they do not intimidate or offend the people around them. But wearing a mask that is fundamentally too small for your mind is suffocating. The daily performance of pretending to be less than you are requires a massive amount of psychological energy. Eventually, the emotional cost of this constant suppression leads to severe, invisible burnout. And this is where we return to the image from the very beginning. That silent figure standing perfectly still in the middle of a loud, moving crowd. When a highly intelligent person finally chooses self-isolation, it is almost always misunderstood. Society views their quiet withdrawal as pure arrogance. People assume they think they are simply too good for everyone else, but the reality is completely different. Their silence is not a cold fortress of superiority. It is a desperate, necessary sanctuary. It is a quiet room they build inside their own mind, the only place left where they can finally stop pretending, drop the mask, and just breathe. This brings us to a profound, almost painful question. Why is it that the very minds capable of solving the most complex problems of humanity are so often powerless when it comes to solving the simple equation of their own happiness? To understand this, we have to look at the different mechanics of joy. It is crucial to realize that there is absolutely no right or wrong way to experience life. For the vast majority of people, happiness is a beautiful, grounded experience found in the present moment. It is the profound gift of being able to sit still, enjoy a simple gathering, feel safely connected to others, and just let the world be exactly as it is. They can accept reality at face value, and there is immense, genuine peace in that. But for the profoundly gifted mind, the brain simply refuses to rest on the surface. Instead of simply experiencing a beautiful moment, their mind automatically begins to deconstruct it. While everyone else is comfortably enjoying the warmth of a conversation, the hyper-intelligent mind is silently analyzing the social dynamics. They are involuntarily searching for hidden risks, zooming out to view the interaction from a detached philosophical lens, or looking for flaws in the system. Because their brain is perpetually taking reality apart to see how it works, they often lose the ability to just sit back, relax, and comfortably live inside it. Ultimately, an extraordinary mind is a breathtaking gift. But as we have explored today, it is also a profound, invisible weight. It is a unique human experience that desperately needs our understanding, rather than our quick judgment. If any part of this journey resonated with your own life, if you have ever felt like an alien observing humanity from behind a glass wall, please know this. You are not broken, and you are certainly not alone. Choosing to step back from the noise is not a social failure. It is not a sign of defeat. Embracing your quiet space is simply how you protect your peace. It is entirely okay to stop forcing yourself into spaces that are just too small for your mind. Before you go, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments below about a specific moment when you felt forced to hide your true, complex thoughts, just so you could blend into the crowd. Let us build a space where you no longer have to pretend.